Captain Elena Park had never loved ceremonies. Polished boots, pinned ribbons, the way fluorescent lights made heroes look like store mannequins. None of it felt true. Truth lived in the dirt, in the half-seconds between breath and decision, in the way a squad moved because one voice steadied them. She preferred the field, where words were few and consequences immediate. The field this time was a broken spine of mountains at the edge of a land the maps named, but people seldom visited. Locals called it the Chain of Ash after wildfires that swept through a decade ago, leaving the slopes brown and brittle. Elena's battalion had been rotating through forward operating bases for months, tracking a network of raiders who hit aid convoys, then vanished into the rock. Intel said the valleys had been quiet for weeks. Patrol, recon, routine, that was the brief. At gray dawn, her 4-vehicle column rolled out from the temporary base, tires chattering over gravel. The air smelled like coal and fennel. The wind carried a bite from snow higher up the ridge. In the lead vehicle, Elena studied the tablet on her knee. Contours, choke points, dry washes, goat tracks, old burn scars that acted like corridor sores. The riverbed, currently a ribbon of dust, cut the valley into 2 shallow bowls. A perfect place to funnel movement, also a perfect place to be funneled. Sergeant Malik Rami sat shotgun, chin tucked into his collar. "We'll be back by chow, Captain," he muttered, not quite a question. "If the terrain is honest," Elena said. He chuckled. "Terrain lies? Only every time you stop respecting it." Behind them, Private Annie Cho, 20 and still trying to grow into the sudden weight of a uniform, hummed under her breath. She pretended she wasn't watching Elena, but Elena felt the gaze, a student tracking a teacher's hands. Elena had been Cho once, full of nerves and purpose, wanting to do everything right, convinced that doing everything right could keep everyone safe. They passed a village of low mud homes clinging to the slope like barnacles. An old man watched with unreadable eyes. A girl waved. A dog barked once and lay down again. Then the world narrowed to rock and wind. As they dipped into the first bowl, the radios picked up a smear of static. Normal, she told herself. The mountains threw tantrums of interference. Still, she keyed the mic. Falcon 1 to base, entering Sector C comms are scratchy. "Copy, Falcon," came the reply, thin but there. The second bowl spread like a mouth. Something in the quiet tugged at her. An absence. No goat bells, no distant hammering from a shepherd's lean-to. Even the wind seemed to hold itself, as though waiting for someone else to speak first. Elena glanced at the ridgelines. Black glass winked in sunlight and vanished. Scope? Lens? Or just a shard of bottle? "Eyes up," she said. "Gunners scan high. Drivers slow to 15. Malik, mark those ridges." Her breath came steady but shallow, a premonition she knew not to ignore. The column crawled, engines a low growl against the hush. She saw it again, a brief, decisive flash, too clean to be junk. Contact! The blast folded the road in on itself. The lead vehicle bucked as if struck by a giant's fist, tilting hard. Windows shattered, heat slapped her face and the air filled with grit and ringing. Voices overlapped. "IED! Cover! Out, out, out!" while the mountains discovered their echo and hurled it back. Gunfire stitched the dust, bright and merciless, chewing stone into powder. Elena hit the ground behind the wheel well and dragged Malik with her, tasting iron. She counted flashes on the ridge. Left ridge, elevation 300 meters, right ridge, 2 nests minimum, a third glint deeper in the bowl, 20 shooters, maybe more. Triggers disciplined, volleys coordinated, not a random hit and run, an ambush honed by practice. "Falcon 1 to base, under attack, multiple contact, grid." Static swallowed her. She tried another frequency. The mountains refused her. Her commander, Major Ortega, waved from the second vehicle, lifting his head a fraction too high. A burst cut across him. He slumped behind the axle, limp. "Elena!" Malik's voice yanked at her when grief reached for breath. "Orders!" Leadership moved toward her like a living thing, heavy, inevitable. She met it with both hands. "Smoke on my mark," she said into the squad net. "Alpha left, Bravo right, Malik with me center. Drivers, kill the engines, no silhouettes. Gunners, short bursts. We're not wasting rounds." She hurled a smoke canister, then another, watched the white bloom churn against wind, and used it to reposition the wounded. Cho was at her elbow, eyes wide, jaw set. Annie, Elena corrected herself, voice a steadier current than her pulse. "On me. We're pushing to that rock fold." Rounds hissed overhead, carving sparks from stone. The radio coughed and died. The valley's hush inverted into something with teeth. Elena felt fear knock softly, polite, a reminder of what could be lost. She set it down beside her like a bag she would pick up later. For now, there was only terrain and her people moving through it. They reached the fold, a natural V where two boulders leaned into each other, and Elena mapped the next minutes in the part of her mind where maps blended with muscle memory. Crossfire, elevation, ammo counts, angles. She breathed in the dust, breathed out a decision. "We hold," she said, though no one had asked the question. "We hold." Above, a single hawk circled, small and patient in the white sky. The first minute after an ambush lasts a lifetime. The second lasts a little less. By the third, choices begin to calcify into fate. Elena set the squad into a staggered defense. Alpha tucked hard left behind a shelf of basalt. Bravo stretched right along a low berm pocked with roots and shadow. She paired gunners with calm hands to medics with quick ones. "Shooters shoot, medics move," she said, and habits took over, tourniquets, pressure dressings, counting breaths. The smoke thinned and the ridges brightened into menace. The enemy had the amphitheater and the script. She had the understudies and the will to improvise. "Malik," she said, "mark the west ridge. It's crawling." He peered through a battered scope. At least 12, advancing low. They're trying to fold us like a book. Elena scanned right. A second element shifted, crab-like, using broken shale as stepping stones. A third nested behind a pale scar of stone, maybe a sniper. Her mind threaded lines between them, a web she needed to cut before it cinched. "We're not a book," she murmured. "We're a nail." "Ma'am?" "Never mind. Cho, status?" "2 wounded stable, 1 bleeding heavy, Corporal Voss. I'm on him." "Copy." Elena thumbed the squad net. "Short bursts, count your shots. If you can't see a face, you can't spend a round." The enemy pulsed forward. Fire erupted from both ridges, a disciplined sweep, testing each hole in their cover. Elena waited, 2 beats, 3, then popped from the fold and fired 3 crisp rounds at the left ridge's high flank. The nearest muzzle flash winked out. She ducked back, heart banging the ribs, ears a hive. Stone powders drifted down her collar like cold sand. "Captain!" Malik shouted. "RPG sound!" The whoop of a launcher bloomed, followed by a crack that slapped the air apart. The rocket hit just short of the disabled lead truck, flipping a door into the sky. Heat licked her cheek. Private Cho flinched and kept her hands on a bandage. Elena felt a stab of useless pride. She needed the enemy to look somewhere else. "Malik, you and Diaz push south 10 meters, low and fast. Fire from there, 5 count, then drop back. Make them chase ghosts." "Copy." They moved like a single shadow. When their burst came, it was at a trickster's angle, a brushstroke that made the left ridge blink and adjust. Elena pivoted and sent 2 shots into the right ridge's middle, punishing anyone who lifted his head to reply. Piece by piece, she stole seconds. Seconds were the currency of survival. Static, then a hiccup of clarity. "Falcon, any unit, report." The voice was faint, like someone calling through a canyon. Elena slammed her thumb to transmit. "This is Captain Park, Falcon Element. Multiple enemy on both ridges. Grid." The mountains inhaled the rest. She stared at the radio as if disobedience were personal. Cho's voice sliced in. "Captain, Voss is pale. He needs evac." "Copy, we'll make the evac." Ridge left, learned. It split, 2 prongs gliding, 1 to pin, 1 to fold. Whoever was on that side had practiced against people like her. Elena felt an odd surge of respect, cooled immediately by obligation. Respect meant you fought smarter. She scanned the ground within arm's reach, a sloughed slab of basalt creating a narrow ramp, a tangle of brittle brush, 3 smoke grenades in her vest. Beneath the brush, the earth had a faint decline, a forgotten rain channel down to a boulder break. It could be cover if they moved now. "On my mark," she said, pulling smoke. "We shift east 10 meters to the crease with the dead grass. Medics first with the wounded, gunners last with suppressive fire. We leapfrog. We do not stop." "Copy." She pulled pins and tossed. White pillars boiled into the air. The enemy hesitated. The ridges lost sight for a blink. "Move." They ran bent double inside a ghostly hallway. Elena's foot slid on loose shale. She caught herself with a palm and kept going. Someone fell behind her. "I'm good. Go!" And for a sick breath, she had to trust the voice. The crease accepted them, and when the smoke thinned, their angles had changed enough to scramble the enemy's script. Her people breathed in harmony, ragged but together. They held, they bled, but they held. Then the mortar thuds began, soft, hollow, methodical, a drumbeat tuning itself. Elena's skin prickled. The first shell fell long, the second short, the third bracketing them like a predator's paws. She imagined a crew just beyond the far ridge, kneeling calmly, sliding metal into a tube with a rhythm older than this war. "Spread! 2 meters between bodies!" she shouted. "Use the gully's elbows! Don't share cover!" Dirt geysered a dozen meters away, clods thumping like fists. Elena pressed her face to the earth, tasted dust, swallowed fear like aspirin. She had trained for this, and training was the rope you held in your teeth when the river pulled. The barrage stopped suddenly. Not mercy. Calculation. Footsteps scuffed up the slope opposite. The left ridge surged again, closer now, confident. Elena sighted at the leading shadow and squeezed. The figure dropped. "Keep your rhythm," she called, not loudly, not theatrically, just enough for her squad to borrow the steadiness. They were running out of ammunition. Elena counted magazines by touch, 1 full, 1 half, 1 maybe. The radio crackled. A phantom word, a promise of help, then nothing. She could not wait for rescue no one could hear. If the mortar crew kept its nerve, the next bracket would end them. She needed to change the story. She needed the sky. Elena had worked with air support enough to know 2 truths. The sky could save you, and the sky wasn't listening unless you gave it a reason to. She needed line of sight, a clean mark, and a transmission that could punch through the valley's mean mood. The only place to get all 3 was the knife-back ridge to the northeast. A steep scramble across open ground in scree, a place the enemy would watch because only a fool would try it. "Malik," she said, "you have the squad." "Captain." "You have them," she repeated. "If I'm not back in 5 minutes, you fall back along the dry wash and make them pay for every meter." His jaw clenched. "Copy." Cho grabbed Elena's sleeve. "Ma'am, Captain." "Keep people breathing," Elena said. "I'll make the sky pay attention." She packed the laser designator and spare batteries, 2 smokes, 1 frag. She stripped her kit to climb light. Then she chose her moment, the quiet between the enemy's inhale and its shout. Smoke. Sprint. Scree sliding under boots. Bullets whispered past with the intimacy of insects. A chip of stone kissed her cheek and drew a bright line of blood. She rolled behind a slanted slab, then ran again. Halfway up, she froze. A figure pivoted above, rifle angling down. He was young. Strange, the things you notice. Eyes wide, shirt too thin for the altitude. In another life, he could have been tending goats. In this life, he had learned to brace on rock and exhale before he fired. Elena moved first. 1 shot. He fell backward, out of sight. She didn't look where he landed. Her breath sawed. Her shoulder burned. Her legs did what she asked. She reached the spine of rock and flattened herself against the world. The valley opened below, miniature and enormous. Her squad a handful of dark commas among pale stone. The enemy moving like ants with purpose. The faint smoke of veil torn in strips. On the opposite slope, a mortar crew crouched around the tube. "Got you," she said, not with triumph, but with relief. She set the designator on a nest of stone and powered it. The screen flickered. The reticle wavered. She steadied it with the cadence her father taught her when he showed her how to photograph birds. Don't fight your pulse. Breathe with it. She painted the mortar pit and keyed the radio to the emergency air net, the one that rode the upper air like a kite string. "This is Falcon 1, Captain Park," she said. "Troops in contact. Priority target marked by laser. Danger close. Request immediate air at grid." She spoke the numbers with the care of a surgeon. Silence. Then a miracle of vowels. "Falcon 1, copy. 2 minutes out. Sparkle, confirm." She squeezed the trigger. The designator sent an invisible finger into the world. The ridges were suddenly full of attention. Rifles rotated toward her perch. Bullets searched for her spine. She pressed the designator tighter and willed herself smaller than the rock. 2 minutes were 80 years. Malik's voice cut in, thin but fierce. "Captain, we see you." "Hold them. 30 more seconds, then get low." The sky changed voice. First a distant insect, then a ripping fabric. The jet came like a line drawn fast with a ruler. Elena didn't cheer. She didn't breathe. She kept the mortar pit inside her reticle as though faith itself demanded a physical shape. The first munition dropped with a whistling that seemed almost delicate until the world folded where the mortar had been. Fire flung itself upward. Shock rolled over her like a giant's hand and pressed her into the stone. She blinked ash and saw the second strike carve the left ridge's backbone, scattering figures like dry leaves. A third tore the pale scar where she'd guessed a sniper lay. The Valley's script burned and the actors forgot their lines. Elena slumped to her elbows. Relief came like a wave, and with it, pain. She tried to stand, and the ridge betrayed her. Rock sloughed, boots slid, gravity remembered. She fell 10 feet, then 6 more, then hit and went blind with white for a breath. When the world returned, she tasted blood and copper and distant smoke. Somewhere a part of her did the arithmetic of ribs and decided nothing was punctured. "Falcon 1, the pilot said, calm as a kitchen clock. "Effects on target. Do you require another pass?" Elena swallowed copper. "Negative. You've given us air. We'll take ground." She crawled, then stood, then ran badly. At the bottom of the slope, Malik and Cho were hauling a wounded man to better cover. "Captain," Cho said, tears streaking dust on her face that she pretended were sweat. "You did it." "We did what the terrain allowed," Elena said. It was not humility. It was the truest sentence she owned. The enemy's fire thinned, then staggered, then withdrew in threads. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that remembers sound. Elena leaned her helmet against the rock and let her body shake for exactly 3 seconds. Then she picked up the radio and started counting her living. By dusk, the valley smelled like hot metal cooling. Medics moved with a new exhaustion, the kind that makes hands less clumsy and eyes more old. Casualty reports replaced the rhythm of gunfire. 3 dead confirmed, 1 critical, 6 wounded stable. Numbers tried to be clean, grief refused to be. Elena walked the line. She stopped at Voss, who blinked at her through painkillers. "Captain," he whispered, "we made it?" "We did," she said. It was both confession and promise. She had no words for Major Ortega. She took his tags, brushed dirt from the edges, and gave them to Malik with a nod. Later, when the last helicopter thudded away with the worst of the wounded and the sun arranged itself behind the peaks like a medal she hadn't asked for, a drone of bureaucracy rose from the radios, report formats, preliminary commendations, requests for statements. Someone somewhere had already drafted a phrase like conspicuous gallantry. The thought made her jaw hurt. In the brief shelter of night, with stars like cold pinpricks overhead, a colonel patched through. His voice carried that mix of sincere admiration and institutional distance only career officers perfect. "Captain Park, your actions today undoubtedly saved lives. I'm placing you in for the Silver Star. There will be press interest." Elena stared at the pebbles by her boot as if they were a new language. "Sir, the squad saved the squad." "Of course," he said, meaning well, "but leadership matters." "Roger." When the call ended, she sat with Malik and Cho on overturned crates by the dim glow of a chem light. The mountains had reclaimed some of their older quiet, the version that belonged to wind and owls rather than ambushes. Cho held a tin mug in both hands, as if it contained not soup but heat itself. "I keep seeing it," Cho said softly. "The first blast, the way the air bent." "It will come back," Elena said. "That's normal." "Does it stop?" "It changes." Elena unfolded the truth as gently as she could. "It becomes part of the map you carry. You learn where not to step without looking." Cho nodded, not reassured but accompanied. Malik studied Elena over the rim of his cup. "They're going to turn you into a headline, Captain." "I'll be a line break instead," Elena said, and Malik huffed a laugh that still somehow found the sound of gratitude. Hours later, alone in a tent that smelled like canvas and disinfectant, Elena tried to sleep. The body wanted to, the mind refused. She took out her notebook and wrote, not the tactical after-action, which she'd deliver in the morning, but the other report she had learned to make for herself. Names, small kindnesses, the way Diaz had cracked a joke while bleeding to keep Cho from crying. The sound the valley made when the jet arrived, like a held breath released, the shape of a hawk circling once and then gone. The pen moved. The ache didn't. She replaced the pen and stared at the black canvas above her. In the silence, the question came that came to all leaders after days like this. Was there a cleaner version? She traced every decision, the push to the crease, the timing of the smokes, the sprint to the ridge, the call for air. She found a few seconds she could have saved. She found none she could change. Morning brought the photography of recognition. A field PAO snapped images of the cratered road and the battered faces that had refused to bend. A journalist tried to shape a narrative around a single figure. Elena kept leaning the lens toward the squad. Still, photos found her. A woman in dust and dried blood, eyes both tired and alert, shoulders square out of habit. People would call it calm under fire. She knew it was simply work. At a makeshift ceremony 3 days later, a general read words about valor. Elena's name rose and fell with the cadence. Applause obeyed itself. She stood at attention, let a metal touch fabric, and thought of Ortega's hands arranging map tiles the night before. Afterward, a young private from another company approached and said, "Ma'am, you make me want to be braver." Elena thanked him and made a note in her head to talk about fear at the next training. Not the absence of it, but the stewardship. In quieter hours, families' letters arrived. Some thanked her for bringing their kids home. One, written in a careful hand, said only, "He spoke of you. He said you made the ground feel less slippery." Elena read that one twice, then folded it like a fragile map and kept it in her pocket for a week. At night, the valley returned, not as a threat, more like a film that insisted on replay. She let it roll. When the mortar thuds came in memory, she breathed in 4 counts, out 6. When the first blast bloomed, she watched herself throw smoke and move people and hold. The scene came with less edge each time, not duller but less jagged. She discovered, as she always did after days like this, that courage had nothing to do with medals and everything to do with maintenance. You maintained the will. You maintained the team. You maintained the thin line between fear and function until it frayed, then you stitched it again. Months stretched. The chain of ash ridges slipped from the news cycle, then from dinner tables, and finally into that quiet drawer where the world files events it cannot keep staring at. Elena's squad rotated, trained replacements, and rotated again. The valley stayed in them like a seam. Elena's new role slipped between combat and instruction. Command asked her to brief incoming units on holding in a kill bowl, on making seconds multiply, on when to risk a ridge run and when to dig smaller rather than deeper. She built modules that looked like tactics but were really about attention, where to put it, how to share it, how to recover it when the world shouts. She had them practice counting breaths in noise. She had them rehearse saying 3 sentences that mattered under fire. "I'm moving, cover me, I'm okay." In one class, a lieutenant asked, "Ma'am, how do you know when to become the point of the spear?" Elena thought of the moment she stood below the ridge with the laser in her pack and the sky pretending to be deaf. "When waiting costs more lives than moving," she said, "and when you're willing to pay for the move yourself." She spoke at a school once, far from the mountains, because a friend asked and because she owed the world her best version of honesty. She didn't talk about glory. She talked about teams and maps that change, and how fear is an animal you don't starve or feed, you leash it. During Q&A, a girl with ink-stained fingers said, "My brother calls you a hero." Elena smiled and replied, "Your brother is the kind who makes other people brave. That's my definition." Letters still came. One from Ortega's sister contained a photo of him as a teenager, all elbows and grin. Elena pinned it above her desk for a month, then mailed it back with a note. "He taught me to love planning. We kept his shape in the line." The reply arrived 2 weeks later. "Thank you for saying his name out loud." Healing took the shapes it wanted. For Cho, it was distance and late-night runs and a tattoo on her forearm. 3 small lines for 3 friends, drawn where a watch would have rested. For Malik, it was meticulous notes and bad jokes and planting succulents on windowsills the way some people keep fish. For Elena, it was maintaining the ledger of names and small mercies and adding new ones carefully, and sleeping enough nights in a row that the valley's edges softened into topography rather than threat. One evening, alone on a quiet rooftop back at the larger base, Elena watched helicopters drift in across the lights like slow insects. The sky was clear, the kind that makes stars look unreal. She thought of the hawk that circled over the valley on the worst day and wondered, not fancifully, just curiously, what it had seen. Movement, heat, a pattern it couldn't name. Malik stepped through the hatch with 2 paper cups. "Figured you'd be up here." "You figured right." He handed her one. "They put another article out about you," he said, not quite apologetic and not quite amused. They had become a harmless pronoun. "What's the headline this time?" "Captain who called the sky." She almost smiled. "The sky was listening already. I just happened to speak up." He leaned on the railing. "You know they'll keep telling the tidy version. Then we'll keep telling the true one." She took a sip. "That we held because people held each other. That seconds matter. That fear stayed on a leash." He nodded, then let the quiet stretch between them until it felt like shade rather than silence. Before he left, he said, I told Cho something today, that it's okay that the valley lives in our heads. What did she say? She said, it's okay, it just means I know the terrain better now. Elena let that settle in the air. She's going to be a hell of a leader. You made sure of it, he said, then disappeared back down the hatch. Alone again, Elena took out her notebook. She wrote a line she had been circling for weeks without wanting to say it wrong. Courage is not the moment you move, it's the maintenance you do so that moving stays possible. She underlined maintenance twice. She added a second line. We carry them by carrying forward. A breeze lifted and dropped the edge of the page. The distant clatter of a helicopter door sounded like a familiar punctuation mark. Elena looked up and let herself picture the valley one more time, not as a wound, but as a classroom where the lesson had been costly and permanent. She imagined walking its road again in a different season, grasses stitching green threads through ash, a shepherd's bell awake in the distance. Terrain heals too if you let it. Her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't know. I was one of the pilots on the call that day. We saw your laser hold steady when everything shook. Just wanted you to know you made the sky simpler for us. She read it twice, then typed, thank you. You made the ground survivable. When she put the phone away, she pressed the notebook to her chest for a second, an old habit, unmilitary and private. Then she set it down and stood at the rail until the night cooled her face and the stars resumed their indifferent patience. Elena Park would fight again. She would teach and brief and sign condolence notes and write names and advise generals on the difference between tactics and timing. People would call her many things. She would remember the truest, a person who maintained a line so others could cross it. The medals would tarnish, the articles would be archived, the valley would weather back into just a place. The work would remain. And when the next young soldier asked her how to be brave, she would say, notice, breathe, decide, move, then help someone else do the same.